Well, I mean, I think there is money that can be saved and efficiencies that can be saved, and through collaboration and through working together and changes with respect to that. We accepted the HMIC report, which said that there could be 12% reduction in central government funding, which is amounted to approximately £1 billion, just over £1 billion, that could be made without impacting on frontline services. That report also said, however, that that had to be spread over a number of years, not front-loaded as the current budget is. But so we had a situation where we accepted that there could be some change in practices and collaboration and all of the things that police forces and police authorities were doing anyway. But 20% cuts goes way beyond what the inspectorate said. So, as I say, we laid out plans which said that their savings could be made, but what we're seeing with the budgets goes way beyond that. Well, what I don't see as inevitable from the Windsor Review is a review which takes place which doesn't negotiate, doesn't understand the very real concerns that police have about some of the ways in which things are coming out of the Windsor Review, which appear to make significant changes, or seem to be suggesting that there should be significant changes, without agreement almost. And I think the important thing to say about the police service, I think they're up for change. They're up for looking at how officers can be more effectively deployed, looking at whether there can be changes in the way that shift patterns operate. But I think what I've seen from the Federation and others as well is to say, look, many of the changes that seem to be being suggested by the Windsor Review can be done at the present time, providing that they're negotiated, and surely any good relationships that you would want would be about getting to the agreement. If you look at voluntary shift agreements, you can already have and change, and many forces have changed voluntary shift agreements. But the voluntary shift agreements have to be done, as we all know, with the agreement of the local negotiating board. Well, that seems to me to be an appropriate thing to do. It shouldn't be a barrier, but what it does do is it says, look, if we're going to move to a different system of shifts, a different way of working, which impact on police officers in terms of their lives, then this should be something that's done through negotiation and done through agreement. And I think that's the danger of the Windsor Review. I think the Windsor Review, you always have to look at what's going on and see whether things have modernised in the way that you would want. And sometimes it's worth and necessary to have a challenge. But a challenge should be something that challenges and causes people to negotiate a settlement, not something that people feel in the end may lead to something where they're going to be dictated to. Well, there's a number of concerns. If you look at the new police and crime commissioners, the directly elected individual, they have unfettered power. The police and crime panels that are set up alongside them, they can veto an appointment, they can veto a precept, but with a 3/4 majority, they can't veto a sacking. So there's real concerns that you have a police and crime panel set up under the new arrangements, which is completely toothless. It's a toothless watchdog. That's what I'd say about the police and crime panels. But then you move away from the local force collaboration and the new governance structure there to look at what the government are proposing with respect to the new national landscape. Well, part of the problem they've got is this. You can abolish the MPIA, as they're proposing to do, but you can't abolish its functions. Who's going to do it? So the Police National Computer, the DNA database, all of these things. After they decided to abolish the MPIA, they suddenly thought, oh goodness, who's going to do all this? So they say, oh, we'll put it in the National Crime Agency, although now I understand there's a bit of second thoughts given to that, which still leaves the question of what will happen to it. But the National Crime Agency is supposed to be a crime-fighting agency. It's not supposed to do some of these other things, so there's real problems with that. Then, of course, they suddenly realised the MPIA was supposed to be abolished in 2012, and the new National Crime Agency wasn't supposed to be coming until 2013. So they suddenly thought, oh my goodness, what's happening here? Now, again, I understand there's been some rethinking around that, although it's unclear to me and unclear to everybody I speak to exactly what what that means. Then, of course, we've had the huge row about CEOP, a very successful organisation that's made a huge difference to child protection and the education of children and driving change and reform forward in that area. CEOP to be put into this new National Crime Agency. So, and it's unclear what the impact of that will be. So, I mean, there's a bit of moving of deck chairs going around here without anybody being totally clear what the consequences of all that will be. Whether it will be more effective, less bureaucratic and more efficient. And one has to say that the Serious and Organised Crime Agency at a national level was having, in many respects, quite considerable degree of success, as its officers would have pointed out recently, where we've seen heroin prices rise on the street and the availability of heroin actually fall, which was due to much to what soccer was doing. But let me just say this: one of the big unresolved issues with respect to the governance of policing and the policing landscape that the National Crime Agency or whatever will have to deal with is the merger debate that took place. And nobody wants to get rid of individual police forces. They're there. But the merger debate was about saying, what do we do at a regional level about tackling serious and organised crime? Who's responsible for that? How do we bring that about? And the mergers was one way, and the wrong way, I think now, to actually tackle that. But if you have a National Crime Agency and local police forces, you still have a regional gap. And I think that any new structure that's put in place will have to look to see how that gap will be filled. What tasking, for example, will the National Crime Agency have at that level? And how will they liaise with the individual forces to bring about that regional capability and that regional capacity? And I think there's still a real debate to be had in policing about how that cross-border, that cross-force crime is tackled. Many forces do it really well, but there's still an issue about it and something that needs to be discussed. But as I say, there's some moving of the deck chairs going on at a national level, and they need to actually realise that moving deck chairs is one thing, solving problems is another.